Well, good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? Come on, let's get into it. We're alive. We're here. We're past the wonderful part of the time change, right? Like now we're adjusted, and so you all are just tired again. But I'm excited to be with you this morning. We're continuing on in our series called Promised, and if this is your first time with us, it's this series where we're looking at the promises of the Messiah in the Old Testament and how Jesus fulfilled those promises and why that's so important to us. Because, you know, we talked about it last week. I gave everyone a silver dollar, if you remember that, or a $50, and we kind of talked about if you stack those 2 feet tall over the entire state of Texas, that's the likelihood of Jesus fulfilling just 8 of the 48 messianic promises and really 327 prophecies overall. And so we're in this series going to be looking at just 8 of these prophecies that come out, but really all of these prophecies are given in moments that they need hope. Right? You don't promise someone's coming when everything's going okay. You promise that somebody's coming when things aren't okay. And so this series is really going to focus in on all of these things and in this moment where we can have this hope of the Messiah. And so this week I was traveling. I went to Houston, and I don't know about you, but I mean, travel is just getting harder and harder. It just seems like, I mean, you can get to places faster, right? But the things that you have to go through to travel are just unbelievable, right? And you got to get there 3 hours early, and like we're going to Israel in just a few days, honestly, and so we have to do all of this testing. Jennifer Sierra's here today. I was telling her out in the parking lot, she was like, you know, how is everything going? I said, honestly, I've been there like 4 times. That's not the problem. It's all of this testing, because Thanksgiving is when we would have our 72-hour window, but no one's open on Thanksgiving to do testing. So then we have to wait, and now it's just been a nightmare. But we're getting there. We figured it out. God has split a sea, and we're on our way. But, you know, as I was thinking about like plane trips and all these things, you know, really the worst part of a flight is when you're getting to your destination. And I don't know about you, but I kind of set my mind mentally to like when we're going to land. So I'm checking my watch, I'm checking my phone, and I kind of have set in my mind, like, this is the amount of time that I have to be here. This is the number of hours that I have to be stuck here. Because for me to sit still in life is pretty hard, right? And I'm like the overambitious person, like, I'm going to read a book on the plane, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to write a message, right? And I don't, right? I just watch a movie. But I just think through these moments of, man, okay, we got 20 minutes. And, you know, there's the ding ding when you're 20 minutes out from your destination, like, bing. And you're like, okay, here comes the captain, and he's going to say, all right, everybody, we're about 20 minutes. We're going to begin our initial descent into Houston or wherever you're going. Hey, flight attendants, could you just prepare the cabin for landing? And, you know, that's when you got to put your tray table up and get packed up to leave, right? The worst part of a flight, and this has happened to me a few times, is when you're doing that and you get into this portion where they get on the flight and it goes bing, and they go, hey folks, hey, just got to let you know there's a little bit of a delay on the ground, and so we're going to just have to circle the airport for a little bit, and we're going to have to wait before we land. And I don't know about you, but that's about the time that I start to go crazy. I'm kind of like, what do you mean we're not landing? Like, this is the amount of time that you said I was going to be on this plane. And if you're like me, you think, oh man, like, is this going to be forever? Like, how long is this going to last, and what's going to happen? In fact, one time I was on a plane, and the guy gets on, and he's like, hey folks, yeah, the tailwinds were a little bit faster than we thought. So we didn't burn enough fuel, so we can't land the plane. The plane's too heavy right now. And I was like, the plane's too heavy? And he's like, we're just going to have to fly around and burn some gas. And I was like, is this for real? Like, is this part of life? I was like, put the afterburners on. Let's get to the ground. Like, I just want to get landed. But honestly, like, that part of the waiting to land, like, you can see the promise of where you're supposed to be. You're literally flying around the city you're supposed to be in. You're like, oh, there's the Empire State Building, and oh, there's this, and oh, there's that. Like, I'm so close yet so far. And I don't know about you, but that to me is the most exhausting time. It's not the time when I'm traveling from where I was to my promise. It's when I have to wait. And I feel so close to the promise of God. I feel so close to the promise of where I'm supposed to be that waiting is exhausting. And I don't know if you feel that way, but kind of life feels like that. In fact, I entitled today's message, Exhausted in the Waiting. And so we're going to jump into the book of Genesis today, and we're actually going to go through multiple chapters. Don't worry, I'll make it exciting and engaging, right? Because some of us, we always look at the Bible like in one verse or a couple verses at a time, and what you realize is that there's this 10,000-foot view of the Bible. Like we in college always do this, and I do this with my students. What's the one thing the whole thing's saying? Like if you had to give me like, you were writing, like on the back of a book, they have like this little quick synopsis. What would you write on the back of the Bible? What's the one thing this whole thing talks about? Right? Because sometimes we have to see that from Genesis to Revelation, this is one continuous story of God. This is one message, right? And it's fall, rescue, redemption, consummation, right? We have the fall. We have God rescuing his people. After Jesus comes, he redeems, and then what? New heaven, new earth. That's the whole story. It's about how God saved humanity for his glory. And so what happens in this moment is we're going to take kind of a 10,000-foot view of the book of Genesis. I hope to put some pieces together, but we're going to study the life of Abraham. Now, in a lot of our verses, he's going to be called Abram. His name changes. God has a way of when he redeems you and rescues you of changing your name. Right? We've talked about this. Some of you have been identified in your life by your sin, but reality is you're not identified by your sin. You're identified by the name that God calls you. And a lot of times in the Bible, God changes people's names. Right? From Saul to Paul. Peter's name is changed, right? From Simon to Peter. Abraham's name is from Abram to Abraham. Sarah, Sarai to Sarah. This happens all of the time in the Bible. And what it is to signify is you're this new creation now. You're not the old you, you're this new creation. You're not just a broken vase that's been glued together, you're a whole new vase altogether. And that's what the Bible is signifying, but we're going to jump in here. In Genesis chapter 11, let me catch you up on what's going on in the Bible. So Abraham, we're kind of introduced to him for the very first time in the book of Genesis right here. So Abraham is living with his father, Terah, and in the story in Genesis 11, there's this story called the Tower of Babel. Maybe you've heard that, right? Like you've heard about this story where these people all together, the world is unified and has one language, and they decide that they're going to build a tower to heaven. And God sees this and goes, you couldn't handle heaven right now, so I'm not going to bring you up here, and you can't do this. And so God destroys the tower, but what he does to the people is he separates them, and the Bible says that he gives them different languages. And this is where the languages of the world come from. Well, then we're immediately introduced to Terah and Abraham. And what happens is they're living in this city called Ur, and God calls them to leave Ur to go to Canaan. And so Terah gets his family, Abraham, Sarai's there, Lot's there, the whole family gets up and they begin to move. But on the move, kind of halfway between Ur and Canaan, the promise, it's kind of like if you got off at your connection. They stop at this city called Haran, and they kind of settle in this city too much. And I don't know about you, but like when we're going towards these promises and the promises of God, sometimes we get off at the wrong connection. Right? Some of us in our life have literally, I was on my way to Houston, so I flew from Sarasota to Atlanta to Houston. And when I got, it's like if I would have just gotten off at the plane in Atlanta and go, you know what? It's not Houston, but it's good enough. I can't have my meetings here. I can't do what I need to do here, but Atlanta's kind of nice. Like, okay, we'll just stay here. And that's exactly what happens to Abraham and his family. So Genesis chapter 11, verse 31, listen to what it says. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, a son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram. And together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. They settled at the connection. And what happens is Terah, he lives to 205 years, and he died in Haran. Now, look at what happens. God goes, hey, your destination wasn't Haran. Your destination is Canaan. And so the Lord says to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land that I will show you. It's time for you to get up and go to Canaan. Now, I remember like when I was on one of these flights and the guy gets on and he goes, hey, we're going to be in the waiting. We're going to have to circle the airport for a while. We're not going to be able to land. And at first I was really mad. But then I do what most of us do. I start scrolling through the movies, right? And I saw a movie. I was like, I've never seen this. I actually want to see this. I really want to watch this movie. So instead of I unpack all my stuff again, I get my noise-canceling headphones. I do all that stuff. I'm getting snuggled in. I got my blanket, and I'm like, we could be here forever. Who knows, okay? And I start watching this movie, and it's getting good. I mean, I'm like, man, I'm glad I watched this, right? And then all of a sudden, about halfway through the movie, just as it's getting like, what's going to happen? And I was like, you better not say it. You better say, we're going to be up here for another 2 hours, right? But no, he goes, hey, folks, Captain here, got great news for you. We've been cleared to land. So we're going to go ahead and set off immediately. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for landing. And I was like, oh, come on, man. Like, I already was ready, but now I'm comfortable in the waiting. I've settled in here, and now you're going to take this away from me. And like what was originally disgruntled for me to go to where I should have been, I got comfortable in being on the plane. And I think that's what happens to so many of us as we're moving towards the promises of God in our life. We get comfortable in the waiting. We kind of figure out that the waiting is comfortable enough. How many of us have made, like, we're not where we should be, we're not where we're supposed to be, but we've made our Haran the nicest place to wait? Could I just tell you that maybe God is making you a little bit uncomfortable in life right now because he doesn't want you to wait in Haran? Maybe the reason that you can't seem to find peace, you can't seem to find comfort, you can't seem to find that money that you want to make, you can't seem to get those relationships going, is because God doesn't want you to be comfortable there. Because he didn't build you for Haran, he built you for Canaan. See, what happens to so many of us is that we've gotten used to the waiting and we're not willing to move forward anymore. In fact, Abraham gets sucked into somebody else's waiting. Right? Terah was supposed to go to Canaan, and Abraham's like, you know what? You're in the waiting. I'm going to just wait in your promises. I'm just going to do this. How many of us are stuck in relationships or mentalities or parts of our life that aren't our promise, but we're stuck in someone else's waiting? I'm just going to wait till they get better. I'm just going to wait till they do this. God's not calling you to wait right now. God's calling you to go to what he's promised you to go to. And see, this happens to us because we settle for good enough. Yeah, Haran was not Canaan. Haran is not the promised land. Haran is not the place that God promised to the people of Israel, but you know what? It was good enough. And let me just ask you, are you settling in this life for good enough right now? God's promised you something so much more, but you're just settling because you've made the waiting comfortable. Listen to what C.S. Lewis says. If you don't know C.S. Lewis, he's a prolific writer. He's probably one of the greatest minds, modern minds that we've had in our world. I look up to him tremendously. In fact, he started out as an atheist. If you want to read his stories and what he does, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, Narnia, things like that. He was best buddies with Tolkien. They would walk around. I've been to the garden where they used to walk at Oxford and talk about the Lord of the Rings and talk about Narnia, and they talked about theology, and there's a pub there called the Eagle and Child. There's a literal bench where they used to sit every night and have drinks and talk about theology. It's awesome. I look up to C.S. Lewis. He's this incredible figure, and he has a way of talking about the struggles of the human soul in a way that we can all understand. And Lewis talks about this, so listen to what C.S. Lewis said. It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at sea. We are far too easily pleased. It comes out of this book called The Weight of Glory. That's how you settle for Haran. You're too easily pleased. I'm not saying that you need to be unpleasable. We all know that there's 2% of people you're never going to make happy. Right? There's certain people that have been in our church that, like, there's nothing you can do to make them happy. And they leave. And you say, oh, okay, you're going to go bother somebody else. Right? And so, the Lord loves you. He's got another home for you. Okay. But I wonder here in this moment if you're just too easily pleased. If part of the reason that we are, and this is what happens to Abraham in this moment, they're just too easily pleased. Haran was okay. So how do you and I get out of kind of being exhausted in the waiting? Because let me just tell you something. When you're not where God wants you to be, it's going to be exhausting and it's going to wear you down. And maybe some of you right now are sensing that in your life. Like, we're actually getting ready to go into the loneliest, most depressive part of the year in just the next few weeks, right? Thanksgiving to Christmas is the most depressed time of year in the United States. Because people realize they're in the waiting. They're not where they want to be or where they should be. Families are torn apart and all of these things. And so what happens in the Bible is as we go into Genesis chapter 12 is God is going to do some things to initiate Abraham to move. Okay, so listen to this. Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 to 4. I will make you, this is God talking to Abraham, a great nation. And I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. All the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. That's the promise of the Messiah, right there. Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. And all the nations on the earth will be blessed through you. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Look at how old Abraham was. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. It's never too late, right? I want you guys to think about this. Let me just tell you something. God can't make you a great nation in Haran. He's not going to. That's not where he's called you to be. See, some of us want all the promises of God, but not in the place of God. God's called you somewhere in your life, but you want all the blessing, all the promises, all of those things in the waiting right now. And God says, I'm not giving you those things. Those blessing and those promises are for this place. And you're wondering, like, why am I not experiencing the fullness of this Christian life, this life that I read about? Why am I not seeing miracles? Why am I struggling with joy? Why do I have bouts of depression? Because you're not where God called you to be, and he's not going to make the waiting comfortable. Maybe the reason you sense this unsettling in your soul is God saying to you, like, your appetite is too weak. We need to grow your appetite. We need you to move forward in this life. In fact, a couple years ago, I was taking some people out to dinner, okay? And I really wanted to bless them. They had worked really hard for me. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to take them. And this is like the place where your steaks are $75 to $100. Okay, so it's a nice place, and some of these people had never been to a really nice steakhouse, right? And so I was like, hey, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be incredible. You're going to love this. This is going to be great. But what I realized in life, there's a dilemma. Because they had never been to places like that and enjoyed probably the best of something, they had built an appetite for something less than the best. They had built an appetite for something that was down here when the promise of everything that is good is up here. And so they learn to be satisfied with second best. And I don't know about you, but if you've had like a really not great steak, you need some A1, right? Like you need a little bit of, I need something on this thing, right? This is not good. But then when you go to a $100 restaurant where they're serving you the best steak, cooked the best, like with, it's unbelievable, you shouldn't need A1 sauce for that. You shouldn't. So we're at this restaurant and we're ordering and we're about to eat. And this, like a filet mignon, super thick. I was like, oh yeah. And as soon as the guy came, he puts down the plate and the guy's like, where's the A1 sauce? And I was like, oh no! Right? I was like, oh! And I just was like, And the guy was like, the waiter was like, it's like he'd never been asked that before. He's like, let me go, I'll go find some. And he brings back this sauce, and it's not opened. And the guy goes, look, brand new sauce, never been opened. I was like, that's because no one uses it. It's not like you just found the right one. No one uses that sauce. Because that's a $100 steak, and you're putting $1.59. Right? So, but but what I realize is what you feed your appetite is what you're satisfied with. And if you're not feeding yourself the best of God and all that God has, you're going to learn to settle for second best and A1 sauce. And I'm not like here to diminish all of those things. I wouldn't show up at Waffle House and go, hey, why isn't this steak like that $100 filet mignon? I get it. Like, and there's nothing wrong with Waffle House. It is what it is. Sometimes we all need a little Waffle House, right? Like sometimes we just got to go. It's not like a less, but it's not the prime, the best of what something could be. Right? And so you can go to like Taco Bell, or you can go to like a real authentic Hispanic Katina restaurant. It's a way different experience. But like, what are you settling for in this life? And so what God does, because Abraham and Sarai and the family are settling. The text actually says it. They settled in Haran. They got comfortable in their waiting. And so how does God get them out of the waiting? He gives them promises. He starts to say, hey, where I'm sending you, where we're going to go, I'm going to make you a great nation. And I'm going to protect you. And those who bless you, I'll bless them. And those who curse you, I will curse them. What he's saying is, I got your back. I know it's scary to leave the waiting because you've made it so comfortable, but you're exhausted in this, dude. Let's go to where I've called you to be. And so let me just ask you right now, what promises of God have you forgotten? See, because in order to be settled in the waiting, you've got to forget what was promised. You've got to forget it. You've got to stop thinking about what God has actually said he wants to do in your life so you can settle, because you'll never have peace if you don't forget. So let me ask you, like, here's what the way this conversation works, like, because you're going to just get comfortable in the waiting. I'll give my life to Jesus later. What you realize is when you're waiting, you're deferring the blessing. Instead, you could give your life to him now and experience freedom. How about this? I'll serve when I have more time. How about maybe when you serve now, you will automatically have more time because you'll prioritize your time. Because let me just tell you something, church. You can do a lot more with less. Maybe you won't waste as much time. Because I got to prioritize. I got to do this. How about this? I'll forgive when. See, you're deferring the blessing of the freedom of when you forgive others. Because forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. When you forgive, you're letting go of the need of you making things right. Things being right for you. So now you're in a bondage to a person who's already hurt you. Why does that make sense? I'm going to stay in bondage to this person who I need to make things right for me, and I can't move on until they do that. I'll forgive when they ask for it, when they do this. All you're doing is deferring the blessing of freedom, of peace. The Lord, it's the Lord's. I'm letting go. Lord, you do it. I forgive him. You do what you need to do. What about this? I'll join a group when I have more time, when I feel like it, when I meet cool enough people, when people aren't so weird, when I'm over being hurt, when I'm not scared of being known, when I'm more comfortable with myself because people think I'm weird, when I get over my anxiety. Instead, you're missing the blessing of being known and people walking through life with you. How about this? I'll give more when I have more. BS. Because giving isn't a matter of the amount in your bank account, it's a posture of the heart. You can give a penny. I'm not asking you to like tithe and give yourself into debt. That's not biblical. Don't do that.